Hello, Falcons. This is a lesson today on theatric strategies as the book outlined them, simulations, role plays, and dramatizations, or I guess the book will outline them as you read for next week. These are pretty common strategies used. I think most teachers don't use them on a regular basis, but most teachers do use them sometimes. I certainly do, and they're good tricks to have in your bag of tricks. Let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, what are some benefits of these theatric strategies? This is kind of an awkward phrase, but I don't know. It's a combination that has, I guess, theater in all these different strategies. So anyway, number one, I think they're fun and they're a nice change of pace. Kids typically enjoy them. They're very active strategies, depending on which you use. Some give kids more freedom to decide how they're going to act. Others prescribe a dramatization. For instance, kids are reading a script, and that's pretty prescribed. But they tend to be more engaged since they are the center of the action in all of these strategies. And if well chosen, they can be kind of immersive. Kids can uh, kind of put themselves in that place and be pulled in. We'll look at some examples where I think that can happen, but certainly they can be drawn in a lot more than the average lecture or worksheet or something like that. There are some significant drawbacks, though, I think, which is probably why most teachers don't use these all the time. Um, First and foremost, they're time consuming. I do over the years, I've done many of these kinds of things, and they almost always take, I would say, 3 to 4 days, sometimes more. Um, and they almost always take longer than you think they're going to take. At least that's been my experience. So you have to be ready to make that commitment of time. For me, trying to get through all of U.S. history, and I think for world history teachers having an even harder job, it's pretty tough to carve out that amount of time. But the benefits are considerable, and so occasionally I think it's worth it. Uh, Another big problem, and I've seen this in my classroom, and because I observe other teachers, I've seen it in other teachers' classrooms as well. The quality tends to be inconsistent. And I've found that there's a relationship. The more freedom you allow kids to think, to plan, to make their own decisions, um, the lower the quality tends to be. Now, you can get, I don't want to say lucky, but there will be students that really strive for excellence and surprise you and go beyond what you even would have imagined. That does happen sometimes. I think more often, if you don't give kids really, um, precise direction and hints and um, structure, that they don't produce the kind of quality that you'd really like to see. The downside, though, is when you give them all that structure and direction, a lot of the benefits of them making choices and being creative, and you kind of lose that. So I found this, I don't know, dichotomy or something. I don't know if that's the right word, but you can have one benefit or the other. You can either get high quality results, or you can give the kids a lot of ability to try things. But it's hard to get both, I think. There are also a lot of uncontrollable variables. When you give a worksheet, when you do a lecture, you control that learning to a very high degree. The more involved kids are, the more the variables are difficult. So, for instance, uh, you have uh, a group of kids preparing for a role, for a drama, let's say, and they have prepared for several days. Let's just say, for instance, um, you assign roles to 10 different kids, and each of them does research and they do their preparation. And then when it comes time for them to come together and to do something, to act something out or whatever, you have two of those kids that are absent. And it can really make it difficult to have a high quality experience. One of those kids has COVID. He's going to be gone for 5 days. Another kid missed half the preparation days and he may or may not be there. You might have a fire drill in the middle of the activity. They might call for a pep rally because the team made the basketball tournament or something, and suddenly you've got 38-minute periods to work with, or it really is amazing, all the different things that can happen, and and they almost always do. So you have to really be flexible. You have to be willing to do things differently than you planned, and that creates some real challenges. So sometimes the experiences go beautifully, but often, especially if you've got a number of different performances or groups or whatever, inevitably one or two of them have some considerable issues, just sometimes because of things that are out of their control. Assessing is also harder. It's easy to tell if they got a question right on a quiz or something, but how do you assess a reader's theater? It's just it's not as simple. And I think it's really important that you be really clear with kids about how you're going to assess them, because it's just more complicated when you do one of these kinds of things. So let's talk about the three different kinds of theatric experiences, lessons that are we're in the subtitle of this lecture, I guess. So in a simulation, students are not playing any role. They are just themselves, but you put them in some kind of a scenario, and and then you see how they react. It's unscripted. Kids are just trying to figure out what they would do if they were in this situation. So some examples. Games. They could be board games. They could be computer games. But if you've ever played the old Oregon Trail, it's a kind of a simulation where they imagine themselves in this situation. What would you do if you had to choose between food or bullets, as you're packing your wagon, and they make choices and they go through this experience and then they see how it turns out. So it could be a game like that. It could be a stock market thing where you give kids a hypothetical $10,000 to invest in the stock market and let them pick and choose stocks at the beginning of the semester and keep track of their stocks over the course of the semester, and in the end to see how they did. That's a kind of a simulation. One that I have used is to give students some information. I give them primary sources on a certain issue. The one that I use is should the United States annex the Philippines? I do this as a group project, so I may have even mentioned it when we talked about cooperative learning, but in this, kids are themselves, but they're acting as a committee to make a recommendation to the president. And what recommendation would you make if you had to give the president advice on what to do about the Philippines? So I give them primary sources. You could give them research, and then ask them to make a recommendation about dropping the atomic bomb, or any kind of decision situation in American history. A role play. So role play is different because in a role play, kids are preparing for a specific role. And so they aren't themselves. They have to take on the character of someone else. You are Andrew Carnegie, or you are Columbus or something, and then they decide what they would do in that situation. Whenever you have kids playing roles, and this is true whether it is a dramatization where it's an actually scripted thing, or in this where you're picking kids to play different roles in some kind of a role play activity. how do you cast people? One of the things that I like to do is put kids in a group of three and have that group of three prepare for a certain role. So we're gonna I've put Columbus on trial over the years. My first year teaching at Martin Luther was the 500th anniversary of Columbus, and some people were celebrating it and some people weren't, and so we decided to put Columbus on trial, and I did that for many years. Um, and so you've got three kids preparing for the role of defense attorney. And I have three other kids preparing for the role of Columbus, and three other kids preparing for a role of Native American. And then I had an anti Columbus historian and a pro Columbus historian. Um, and so kids would work in groups to prepare for the role, and then I would pick one of them to actually play the role. And the issue was not knowing which of the three would play the role created some accountability. So, um, Billy, who often sits back and doesn't do anything, he knows that he might end up playing Columbus, so he better take this seriously. And I'm not sure that strategy was always effective, but it probably did cause kids to be more involved than some of them might have been. But in the end, I probably didn't want Billy playing Columbus anyway, because if Billy played the role of Columbus, this role play when we went through it in class might not go so well. So, but if I always picked the best kids, and that was really pretty transparently happening, it almost gives permission for other kids to check out. So I found a tension there in the casting. And what I tried to do, I think I split the difference a little bit for the most important roles, like lawyers. Because the lawyers controlled so much of how the role play would go, that I would try and pick the best students for those roles. And then maybe for some of the other roles, I would sometimes pick someone who was not um, necessarily the best person in that group. Other ways that I would do it to add an element of chance is that I would often, hold fingers behind my back. Okay, there are three of you. I'm holding a number behind my back, 1 to 3. Count off 1 to 3. Whoever says the number is it. And that, again, created some accountability. Sometimes I would ask for volunteers. Is there anybody in this group that wants to do it? And a lot of times there wasn't, but also there were often times where the most hard-charging person who had done the most work, like, I want to do that role, and so then you get quality that way. So you can finesse it a little bit, but there is a certain tension there and difficulty in casting, I think. So some examples of role plays, you could have a dinner party. So you assign roles, let's say it's 1890, and you have a dinner party, and maybe Samuel Gompers is there, labor leader. You've got John D. Rockefeller there, of course, Standard Oil Trust. Maybe you've got President Roosevelt at this dinner party, Ida Tarbell, Muckraker. You've got I can't think of it. Oh, Jane Addams of Hull House. So you get the idea. You say to people, you're going to prepare for this role, and then we're going to have a little dinner party, and you might have a moderator who brings up issues. What do we think about the strike at the Homestead plant, or our workers' right to try and organize, or whatever. And then you have the people around the table playing that role of whoever they are and trying to respond to the questions as Teddy Roosevelt or whoever they are would respond. Um, Putting somebody on trial, I gave the example of Columbus. I think another natural would be Truman and his decision to drop the atomic bomb. And you could have lawyers, you could have Truman, you could have Emperor Hirohito, you could have advisors to the president, you could have nuclear scientists, somebody who lost a family member. So, and you could have people prepare for those roles, and then put Truman on trial. Did he do the right thing? Anywhere where there was a difficult moral decision is potentially a good place to put on a trial. Or even, was LBJ a good president? And obviously there are pluses and minuses. Civil Rights Act, it's pretty good stuff. But the Vietnam War, not so good. So you could put him on trial or something. Was he a good president? A dramatization is something where you have a script. I'll be honest with you, I don't really do this. And I I'm just not sure I see a great benefit in it, but it may just be a blind spot. So I truly encourage you to give it a try. And I'd kind of encourage you as new teachers to try everything, probably more than once, and see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. I know there are great teachers out there that are doing readers theater or some other kind of script-based activity and having success with it, and kids are loving it. And so I don't want my negative attitude to turn you away from it, but I just can't speak to this too much. I can say that sometimes the teacher will find a good script that brings out issues. And there is something to primary sources, where you hear it in people's own words. So seeing somebody playing a role might cause you to think about, let's just say, slavery a little bit differently. Somebody who talks about losing a child to, a slave sale or something, might hit you a little bit differently in scripted form than it would in a dry textbook form or a lecture. There are also student-written scripts, and I know a lot of teachers who do this, where they have kids create a script. So in U.S. history, you might ask kids to create a TV ad. I know it's a lot of time, but you could have them. If William Jennings Bryan and William McKinley were running for the presidency today, what would be how would television cover that? What kind of TV ads might we see, or posters, or whatever format you want to make? But in terms of dramatization, you could do a dramatization by having people play different roles in a commercial like that they could act out. Or maybe you'd have somebody interviewing someone and the kids would write the script. I see more value in that than the teacher just handing kids a script and having them read it. But I tend not to do those things. So one of the challenges is assessment. How do you assess this? And what the book suggests, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in it, is giving kids a kind of a participation grade. So basically, did you do what you're supposed to do? Did you do some good research? Did you help someone else prepare yourself for the role? Did you make a good faith effort to represent your role or your character? And not so much did you, are you a great actor? That's probably not the fairest thing to judge kids on, but did you participate in this activity with a positive attitude, and you contributed things, and you helped to move it forward in a positive way? And then you also want to have some kind of a content grade. So when I used to put Columbus on trial, I never gave a grade on the trial itself. I have a generic participation grade for the whole course, and I always felt like that could cover that content part of it, or that participation part of it. But the content part, I often had the kids write an essay on the test to demonstrate that they learned about the heroic things that Columbus did, and also the terrible things he did. So some kind of a quiz or an essay, a paper, something like that, where kids would demonstrate that, yes, I was listening, I did get that information, and so that's probably the best way to assess. So that's just a quick overview of these theatrical types of lessons.